Zerglings in StarCraft 1 are absurd. They're cheap, fast, and do infinity DPS. Compared to StarCraft 2 Zerglings only, this run should be easy, right? The same rules as normal apply. Drones are okay to build and mine with, and only Zerglings can fight. Spore colonies can be built to defend against air, but not to just randomly attack things, and sunken colonies are off limits. And because Zerg doesn't have floating buildings, transport overlords are allowed if and only if there's no other way to complete the mission without them, and only to kill objectives. I didn't think very hard when I came up with this rule, and it's going to come back to bite me a lot. The first mission is among the ruins, and it's a bit more involved than the beginning of Marines only. There are 3 objectives: build a spawning pool, build a Hydralisk den, and kill all of the Terran on the map. After macroing up for a bit and taking down an impressive Terran attack wave for the mission, I moved to the first Terran outpost and take it down. For this run, I had the strategic help of my friend Ace. As a StarCraft 1 speedrunner, he knows the Zerg campaigns like the back of his hand and was able to provide me with advice during the run. This put me in safe hands and made me feel much more comfortable. Unfortunately for me, his first piece of advice was that the raids on the map must be killed to proceed. So my plan is to bust into the Terran compound, take all the buildings down, and then build a hatchery at their minerals, get some defensive spore crawlers, and oh, I won without killing the raids. Turns out they're not required at all. I'll take it. Egression is a mission I'm pretty excited for because I've never really played it. The objective is to move a chrysalis to a beacon in the bottom of the map, but even as a kid, I knew the elite Hydralisks that you start with are enough to win the mission on their own. But this time, without them, I died to a zealot. I have to actually play the mission for real, which is a new experience for me. After rushing out some Zerglings so that nothing bad happens, I catch a cheeky zealot attack before it can do anything. After building up my forces, there are 2 paths I could take, a series of poorly defended ramps to the left or straight through the Protoss base in the center. I opt to go through the center because there's nothing more difficult in StarCraft 1 than going up a ramp. The Protoss base is about what you could expect from Mission 2 of a campaign. Zerglings wash over it, a few scouts use their rapid-fire massage cannons to loosen my shoulders, and the drone escorts what I'm pretty sure is Abathur with a Kerrigan inside to the objective. The new Dominion is where things start to ramp up. As I excommunicate my army, I get to appreciate how horrible the starting economy is for Zerg in this campaign. I have 2 drones. The slow economic start before Brood War is really a thorn in my side. Just like last mission, I'm attacked early and have nothing to defend it. Fortunately for me, this time some starting spore colonies absorb the shots as I get a meager army out to defend. After a few minutes, I opt to put these defenses to use and claim an expansion for myself. It doesn't go well. Wave 2 goes better, but it's a bit concerning that it takes 2 attempts to secure a base that's normally claimed with my starting units. That's the last base I can reasonably take on this map, so it's time to set my sights on the Terran fort. The number of Terran isn't crazy, but the terrain absolutely is. The entire north is a ridge covered in siege tanks. They absolutely shred any ground movement before I can reach the enemy. Unfortunately, Zerg just doesn't have a nimble flyer to eliminate these exposed tanks, so I have to charge through instead. Which brings me to one of the major problems with Zerglings in StarCraft 1. I have about 200 of them here, and it's so freaking hard to move 200 of anything in this game. I can get up to 120 Zerglings in control groups, but the remaining 80 is a frantic game of boxing and attack moving, accidentally grabbing already sent Zerglings, and general flailing. It takes over 30 seconds just to get my forces moving, and that means my army ends up as a giant snake. The Zerglings stream in as fast as they can and die just as quickly. And for the lives of all 200, I killed about 3 tanks and a bunker. Also, my expansion is mined out. Also, my main base is mined out. I lost on mission 3. In attempt number 2, I try to be a bit more covert. Instead of charging towards the tanks, I decide I need to get them to come to me. I dart towards the less defended right side of the base. It doesn't go great, but about a third of the Zerglings make it. As I hit the buildings, the enemy rushes to defend. This includes some of the tanks. I dash in, snipe one, and get cleaned up. Well, that wasn't as effective as I had hoped. I need more money if I want to win this. I bring a drone to the less than reasonable mineral field at the top right and take control of the Terran's old base. This was actually an incredible idea. Not for the base itself, but for how angry it made the AI. They instantly pulled their tanks from the defensive emplacements to shell my building hatchery, this time in an exposed position. After the base finished, I build a defensive spore colony to swat away any mosquitoes that might be around and try diving in. The 5 or so tanks that the Terran is missing from their fruitless attacks made the difference, and I barely have enough to break him. At least we got this difficult mission out of the way early. This has to be one of the hardest missions in the run, right? Oh no. But those difficult missions are a long time from now. Agent of the Swarm starts out with a fairly lax defense. Oh, I'm dead. The early defense isn't really that hard, as long as you have a good initial build. Whoa, I'm dead again. Having 3 drones and no Zerglings to start with makes those 2-minute firebat pushes really scary. But now that I know it's coming, I can crush it, and die to the 3-minute push instead. The initial aggression here is absurd. Normally you start with some sunken colonies, which are enough to take out a majority of the enemies, but without their help, the early infantry strikes are deadly. After dying again, and having another close call, I managed to survive for 10 minutes and get my reward. Professional liability Sarah Kerrigan. I put her in my mineral line on hold position and hope that she doesn't find anybody to attack. The real reward is that the enemy backs off of the relentless aggression so I can actually play the objective. I have to destroy a command center on the top right of the map. My base is on an island, meaning I do have to use overlord drops to get there. Once my base is safe, I load up some overlords and begin the great journey. My landing zone isn't ideal, and I find that there's a lot of enemies, so I decide to beeline towards the command center instead of fighting. My army gets cleaned up, but I do reduce the objective to 500 HP. And then I just kind of wait for 4 minutes. And because Jim is bad at StarCraft, the command center burns down and I win. Easy peasy. The Amerigo is next, and it's a no-build mission. After killing my hunters, I get clearing. I have to escort Kerrigan to the bottom left of the map to get some videotapes, and my Zerglings are ready to rumble. The 6 of them do surprisingly well. They take down a ghost, some infantry, a vulture, and distract some Goliaths. Kerrigan then cloaks and walks past everything until arriving at a Zergling pen. After freeing my friends, everybody charges past the insane mineral line and to the locked door. I have to get to a computer in another well-defended area to open it. Fortunately, Zerglings know how to type, so I run them into the objective, unlock the door, and walk Kerrigan to the end. After the Amerigo, we have another shot at the Protoss, and this time, they brought the big guns. After almost losing to a single zealot again, I get my macro engine going. There are 2 nearby expansions that are very safe from ground attack because they're on high ground plateaus. It's really unfortunate that the rules of the run specifically say that drops can only be used on mission objectives that can't otherwise be reached. So with 1/3 the economy I'd like to have, I macro up. Feeling a bit crunched for cash, I remember that there is another base on the map, technically. So I grab my Zerglings and head to the east. This is where I meet the first antagonist of the run, the very hungry caterpillar. 3 of them. Did you know that Reavers have a permanent force field that explodes any Zerglings that get within a 5-mile radius of them? Yeah, they're a ton of fun. Prepared for the fight this time, Wave 2 dives in, and the Reavers made a friend, yay. Fortunately, 2 of them do drop and the 3rd wave takes the base down. But this is the Wish.com version of a base. I can't actually place a hatchery anywhere vaguely near these minerals. But it's better than nothing, so I take what I can get. The next bit of the mission is pretty easy. Tassadar's forces have a huge number of Dragoons, which are absolutely abysmal at fighting Zerglings. The AI was never able to build a critical Reaver number a second time and is broken. Then comes the final objective. I must bring Kerrigan to the island in the middle of the map to duel Tassadar, alone. This means I have to get Overlord drops, bring Kerrigan over, drop her, and then evacuate her and own Tassadar with a bunch of Zerglings. Truly the honorable duel Tassadar was looking for. Then comes the Culling. The beginning is a no-build segment where I'm given an army of Hydralisks and Mutalisks to clear out a Zerg base, and then take it for my own. But it's not a no-build segment. I have money, I have drones, and I can build what I want, I just don't have a mineral line. And that means, by the rules, I can't use these units. So I begin my plan. I'll build a hatchery and then micro Zerglings to take out the base, and then long distance mine until I can afford a why does my creep not spread out from here? I can't make a spawning pool in this starting position. So I go exploring. There's a second Zerg base to the left, and I find this secluded area where I can make a spawning pool and they won't notice it. This might work. I make some Zerglings and they have a single Mutalisk, so I can't take the base. After investigating the map a bit, I decide my only hope is to take a different Zerg base. The guy on the left seems kinda stupid, so let's give that a go. The base has a good number of Hydralisks and sunken colonies, but I find an area on the far side that isn't defended. I can make a hatchery near the mineral lines and they don't really notice. After the hatchery finishes, I use a spawning pool location I found and I'm sharing a base. And their drones are kinda pissed about it. If I ever gather near an enemy drone, it starts harassing me, which is bad because I can't fight back and I only have 3 workers. After restarting a few times and perfecting the opener, I managed to get a setup where I have all my drones at full HP, a hatchery, and a spawning pool. I make some lings and start harassing their drones. I even get bold and go for the hatchery. It's mostly covered by sunken colonies, but there's a small area in the top left that isn't defended. This is actually wild. As I start taking down their infrastructure, Hydras start to arrive, but Hydralisks are not good against Zerglings. Things are going so well, I managed to squeeze a few more drones out, getting all the way up to 5. The next 10 minutes consists of me very slowly peeling apart their defenses, intercepting Hydralisk attacks, and eventually taking on the mighty sunken colonies. Somehow, I managed to take the wrong base and then destroy it from the inside out. It was awesome. Once I hit a critical mass, I roll over the base I was supposed to initially grab and make some spore crawlers to get revenge on the one Mutalisk that caused this entire fiasco. And then I accidentally make some sunken colonies instead of spore colonies, kill a Zergling, and have to reload. Whoops. Once I have 2 bases, it's over. Zerg vs Zerg in StarCraft 1 is pure Mutalisk Zergling fights, which means I'm much closer to an ideal composition than my opponent. I wash over the remaining defense and collect my win. Taking an occupied base and consuming it from the inside out like some StarCraft 1 version of Enemy Within is one of my favorite challenges I've ever had to do. It was so cool. After that amazing adventure comes Eye for an Eye, where there are 3 escape points on the map, and occasionally Dank Templar try to flee. If it gets out, I lose. Unfortunately for Zeratul, my friend Ace has a full list of each escape timing, so I don't let them, and then I kill them. It took a little bit because I was being overly cautious, but at this point I was training with weights on, and normal missions are a cakewalk. The Invasion of Aiur is not a normal mission though. I often find it to be one of the most difficult before the Brood War, and it's largely because of the huge number of Protoss air fielded in the later stages. The mission objective is pretty cool. I must escort a drone to a giant crystal in the middle of the map, who then disappears and harvests it for 10 minutes. Once he's done, I have to escort him back home. The first half is an aggressive push, and then it transitions into a defense mission. It's a neat design, but it has a critical flaw. I begin the mission by grabbing an expansion and launching an attack on the center base. It both acts as a funnel for all of my forces and has a 3rd mineral field. And then the 4th mineral field is just to the right of it. This mission has a ton of minerals, which helps me abuse the game's mechanics. At this point I'm close to the crystal I need to harvest, but I don't need to rush. Instead, I crash through the yellow base to the west, taking out all of his stargates and his ability to make more. And then I head to the east and do the same thing against the Protoss base there. And then the southeast, and then the southwest. I aggressively push through every base that is normally supposed to attack during the defense segment. Because no units are warped in or spawned off of the map in this mission, the enemy just sits there and I harvest the crystal. After waiting around for 10 minutes defending against the single carrier they found to fight me with, I send Droney McDroneface and his crystal back home. Unlike Marines Only, where the final mission of the base campaign was one of the harder ones, Full Circle finishes off the Zerg campaign with one of the easiest. The Protoss defending the temple that I must destroy are pretty strong. There are a lot of them and they have the full tech tree unlocked. But so far, taking bases and keeping an economy has been the biggest problem of the run. Once I can throw money at the problem, it's not that bad. And boy, can I throw money at this problem. With 16 mineral fields at my starting hatchery, I begin the game with 2 bases worth of income. Slightly to the left is another full base worth. And a bit further to the left, guarded by the Protoss, is another base. This one I have to fight for, but it's absolutely worth it. And on the right of my main is another field of minerals. All in all, I end up with an effective 5 bases of mining and over 15 hatcheries producing Zerglings, and I'm still banking money. I can barely watch the fights. My entire mission is spent boxing Zerglings and vaguely sending them at the enemy. It's an easy finish to a hard campaign. Starting off the Brood War campaign is Vile Disruption, a no-build mission that, nope, no chance. There are 7 hives on the map that must be rescued. Each has its own little event that happens with attacking Zerg that must be defeated. Most of them are entirely completable with Zerglings only. It's a Zerg versus Zerg, so it takes a bit of micro, but things generally go well. But there are a couple problems. First, there are these Guardians. They, fly. And if the hive dies, I lose, and I can't build anything under them. So I have to rush to complete the mission before the hive dies. The next problem are these Ultralisks, who I also can't beat, and I have to complete the mission before their hive dies. At the end, I travel through a Nidus Canal, capture the final hive, and get about 10 billion Hydralisks that unburrow for both sides and have a giant battle. There are too many Hydras to stop them from fighting, and even if I could, there are too few Zerglings to beat the enemy, and definitely not fast enough to prevent those previous hives from dying. So every hive can be rescued with Zerglings only, but the mission absolutely can't be accomplished without the Hydralisks at the end. It's a bit of a downer. Rain of Fire absolutely can be completed by Zerglings though, and they have some beefy friends. This mission is really cool. There's a Psi Disruptor that must be destroyed. Instead of starting with a traditional Zerg base, I get an SCV with a Psi Emitter. Bringing him close to Feral Zerg gets me control of them. Unfortunately, the majority of the power that can be rescued here comes from the Elite Hunter-Killer Hydralisks and a Tarask who can almost solo the mission. I can't use them, but my prize is behind this bunker. 3 elite Zerglings called the Devouring Ones. I decided it's fair to consider them Zerglings because they benefit from Zergling-only upgrades on the spawning pool. The devouring ones aren't strictly necessary, but they are awesome. With 120 HP, 3 bonus armor, and double damage, they absolutely shred through any targets unlucky enough to get close to them. Though I only get 3 of them, so it's not like they're flipping the game on its head or anything, it's honestly just a lot of fun. With the red boys leading the charge, I can easily claim 3 mining bases and charge the side disruptor. The first strike falls flat on its face. Now that it's a Brood War campaign, the AI is better, and here there's only a single choke point. The bunker, firebat, siege tank line is more than enough to mess me up. Wave 2 goes a bit better. The choke is broke and I can heap on the pressure so they don't rebuild. With a third wave breaking the disruptor, things really aren't that bad. Maybe Brood War macro missions are just easier. The Kel'Morian Combine is one of my least favorite missions, and in this run, it's also one of the most frustrating. The objective is to mine 10,000 minerals, which is pretty boring. What is a bit more exciting is that this is another mission where I start off with a giant army and am expected to bust through a base that there's no way I can breach with just Zerglings. Fortunately, this time there's a small expansion to the right that doesn't have anything blocking it, but taking a hatchery there angers red and I have to reset. I also have to sacrifice some of my Zerglings to distract for my drones to get up to this base, so I have no firepower to initially work with. I try again, get a hatchery up, and then Brown attacks with Marines before I can get a single Zergling out. This opening is brutal. It's similar in complexity to the Culling, but with a few added problems. The first is that my opponent is Terran, who's much harder to fight in low numbers than the Zerg. And the second is Phoenix. This dingus of a Dragoon is on my team, and he causes me nothing besides frustration. Sometimes the enemy just decides to Marine rush him before the 2-minute mark, and I can't do anything about it. He either dies or kills someone. Eventually I find that if I pull all of my Zerglings in one drone, I can get past losing only one single baitling. After taking out this turret, red no longer has vision of me, and if I build a hatchery as far to the north as I can, I have a base. Then I can actually bring the drones in, sacrifice one to stall yellow again, and start mining. And then comes my plan for Phoenix. I hide him in a corner and hope the enemy doesn't find him. If they do, I reset. Brown decides to play nice and runs his Marines to my base instead. I get a spawning pool and am feeling okay. There's only 6 mineral patches here and some basically have no money, but it's a base and that's all I can ask for. There is a bunker on this plateau and I'd like to be rid of it, so I mass up some Zerglings and attack. But due to the magic of StarCraft 1 pathfinding, a Zergling runs down this ramp and angers red, who counterattacks and slaughters me. After reloading, I send far fewer Zerglings and get the bunker burning before they all die. Close enough. And then Phoenix gets attacked and I have to reload. I end up moving him to a corner of my base that overlooks a high ground attack path where he might be able to hit enemies. There's no good place to put this guy without him getting into a fight. I just have to get lucky. After absorbing a few more attacks, I build up a strike force to clear out yellow, the base I was initially supposed to grab, and take what was supposed to be my main base. After saturating, grabbing an open third base, and getting a decent defense comes the part of the mission I hate. The objective is to mine 10,000 minerals. So I spend 15 minutes sitting around and mining, swatting away small attacks, and then mining some more. The opening in this mission was a mixture of cool and frustrating, but man, is the ending a letdown. After the slog of getting 10,000 minerals, I move on to the Liberation of Korhal, one of my favorite missions in StarCraft. It is simple. The entire map is enemy. I have to kill them, and I start out with those 10,000 minerals. After the standard build order of 6 hatcheries before building a drone, I spend my money on upgrading my economy, buff out my Zerglings, and get this base to the north. I end up with a total of 12 hatcheries for production. The enemy is the UED Terran Zerg combo. They set up fortifications of Terran buildings, sunken colonies, siege tanks, and lurkers. It's some of the most brutal defenses in StarCraft 1, and I don't really care. With my insane production and income, I can afford to throw infinity Zerglings at the problem. It doesn't matter how many die as long as I can make progress and keep taking bases. The 10k boost at the beginning was nice, but the 6 bases I end up with as I progress is what tips it over the edge. I don't really send waves here, it's more of a constant line of death headed straight towards the enemy until they buckle under the pressure and fail. This is what Zerg is supposed to be. Next up is True Colors, Blizzard's customary sneak attack mission. There are 3 Terran bases and 3 Protoss bases here. I have 6 minutes to do what damage I can and build up defenses. Normally, I can take down 3 or 4 of the bases, but there are a few problems here. Because my economy starts off so frail and I can't use the starting lurkers and hydralisks, every larva I make is a difficult decision between being a sneak attack Zergling and a drone. The reason this decision is a tough one is because once the timer runs out, the remaining enemies get really pissed and I have to have a good economy to push them back. If I overbuild Zerglings, I die to the counterattack, and if I overbuild drones, then they have too many bases left and overwhelm me. It's a tightrope walk. I opt to clear out the top left Terran base and eliminate the production facilities at the base below it, effectively clearing out 1.5 bases instead of the normal 3. I was hoping that a lack of production or defenses at the second base would mean that Mengsk would not dedicate as much to defending it. I was wrong. Very quickly after the sneak attack, he starts sending siege tanks to reclaim not only that base, but the top left as well, which has a few remaining buildings. His forces end up everywhere, in my main, the expansion, and contesting me as I clean up his base. He does end up stretching himself too thin and isn't able to crack anywhere. Normally, during all of this, Phoenix's Protoss army gets pretty angry as well, but this time he didn't attack me, which is a bit weird, but I'll take it. I went for the Terran bases first because Terran is the scariest, but after 2 of Mengsk's bases are down, I turn my attention to the Protoss, because the Terran is the scariest and I don't want to fight the final base yet. The Protoss are disappointing. Phoenix might be a legendary warrior, but he's really bad at his job in-game. I uppercut 2 of his bases from the south and clean them out without a problem. With only the main bases of each faction remaining, I attack move all of my forces to the bottom right to finish off the Protoss. And because this is StarCraft 1, the Zerglings decide to run into the bottom left base instead. So I guess I'm fighting there. I send a few hundredlings in, they clean up the peripheral structures, but the Terran base ends up with this incredible defensive core. A bunker, siege tanks in great positions, and battlecruisers bruising my incoming attacks are all sandwiched in between terrain that I can't get over. I opt to go for a double prong attack to bust it, and the damage is so high that I can't even get my prongs to arrive at the same time. My winning strategy ends up being ignoring the combat units and instead targeting down the factories. Fortunately, Mengsk is Bronze League, so he doesn't rebuild these production structures and allows me to brute force his remaining buildings. The last remaining base is Phoenix's compound. It's got Reavers, Archons, Carriers, but most importantly, no buildings because I killed them all easily. The last objectives are to take out Duke and Phoenix themselves. I send a squad of Lings to Phoenix to see how he'd do, and to my surprise, he takes them all out. So I send 100 and he dies. Finally is Duke. He's, in a battlecruiser, and my Zerglings can't jump up and chew on his starship, so I make a base near him and defend it with spore colonies. That's legal, right? Fury of the Swarm is a weird one. The mission starts out with 5 bases, 1 on an island and 4 on the mainland. The 4 bases are instantly attacked and killed. This is by far the biggest problem here. There are a bunch of sunken colonies that I control that need to be stopped. I also can't win the mission without a base on the mainland, so I have to evacuate some Zergling and a drone from the northern base. All in all, I need to get 7 sunken colonies attacking my own stuff, build a drone, and evacuate my Zerglings in a total of 4 seconds. I'm not a magician, so I end up slowing the game speed down. I drop it to minimum, start practicing, and after a few attempts I get an order down and manage to get my bases killed without accidentally taking down an enemy with non-Zerglings. After that, I get to use a speedrun trick for this mission. The enemy Zerg moves to take each base that is destroyed. This northern one is contested by 2 lurkers. If you kill both of the lurkers and the hatchery before everything gets set up, the Zerg is fairly okay with it and lets you macro up. After that, things are fine. I have 2 quick bases and can charge past the Zerg into the Terran base and kill all 25 scientists to win. The final 4 missions come in 2 flavors. 2 insane slogs through some of the most absurd defenses in StarCraft, and 2 missions where I fight the Protoss. Drawing of the Web is the first Protoss mission. I get control of infested Durian and have to bring him to 5 control points around the map. After hiding our hero in a corner so he doesn't shoot anybody, the Protoss attack and I almost die, as is tradition for the Protoss missions at this point. Fortunately for me, this zealot just decided he wanted to cohabitate, so I managed to survive. The main gimmick of the mission are Dank Templar. There are a bunch of them scattered around the map. If they get on top of expensive units like Hydras or Ultras with no detection, it would probably be pretty annoying. But Overlords are detectors in StarCraft 1, so I don't really know what they thought this gimmick was going to accomplish. Once I get a decent mass of units with proper Overlord cover, the enemy just falls over. Each of their outposts are poorly guarded and the actual base isn't significantly more impressive. Once everything is clear, I move Duran to each of the points and move on. Every challenge run has a mission that I know is going to be hell. This time, it is to slay the beast. There are 3 islands on the map. I have to get to the 3rd island and kill the Overmind with Dank Templar. Well, sort of. The Dank Templar actually just have to be in melee range of the Overmind when it dies, so the first problem is taken care of. The actual problem is getting to the island. I wanted to say that I had to use drop overlords here, but because we're fighting the UED, who are a hybrid Terran Zerg faction, there is creep over there, which means I can make a Nidus Canal. This is not good. Nidus Canals are the little brother of StarCraft 2's Nidus Worms. They must be built on creep, have no durability, and take forever to build. They are specifically designed to not be an aggressive tactic, and the only creep on the final island is covered in Zerg and Terran units. Before starting this mission on stream, Ace and I spent a combined 8 or so hours on this mission, testing every possible sequence of plays to see if there's something we could come up with. This is some of the longest pre-planning I've ever spent on a challenge run mission. But before I can worry about the end, I have to get a massive economy. I saturate my initial bases and move to clear out the UED on my starting island. This island has like infinity minerals on it distributed over 6 bases, meaning that when things get bad, I can afford to throw money at the problem. After a few small skirmishes, I charge the orange base to the right. They enjoy lurkers, so I want to get rid of them quickly. It takes a bit of force, but they do fall, allowing me to get that base as well as another mineral line to the southeast. There's one more base on this island, a Terran encampment to the north. I have a 4-base economy right now, so I move in inefficiently and secure it. Now that the island is mine, comes the first problem. The enemy loves air attacks. They drop a lot at the beginning, but as time goes on, they shift towards throwing everything that can fly at me. This means I have to get a bunch of spore colonies to defend, which is technically in the rules, but it feels like I'm more spore than man at some points. It's just wrong. Once I get to about 100 drones, I tech to Nidus Canals and prepare my plan. I found in testing that there's exactly one 2x2 spot inside of the enemy Zerg's mineral line that if I drop a Nidus Canal into, their pre-placed defenders will not be able to see. There is no other space on the entire island that I can safely put a Nidus. Why is there a half HP siege tank with 2 kills sitting behind their mineral line? At some point during the fighting, the enemy evacuated a siege tank and dropped it at this base to reinforce, but instead of somewhere logical, it happened to get stuck behind the mineral lines, exactly in range of where I needed to put my Nidus. This is absurd. I no longer had a plan. So I started playing around with ideas. I might as well clear out the second base while I'm coming up with a better plan. I get some Niduses up, but the monster bases don't budge against my forces. In addition, Guardians are starting to appear, which do a number on my defenses. It is looking hopeless. And then it gets even worse. The enemy starts sending massive attack waves. Valkyries under defensive matrix combined with mass Guardians kills almost all of my static defense, and then they hunt my overlords and supply block me. I could reset here, but I do have 15,000 minerals from my insane economy, so I press on. I live, but things are looking bleak. And then, at almost the 30-minute mark, I'm at 80 supply, struggling with larvae, and the enemy sends another attack. Wait, is that a half HP siege tank with 2 kills? It's him! They sent him back into the fight! Renewed with a sense of purpose, I scramble to crush this villainous siege tank and rebuild my Niduses. And then a bunch of attacks decide that I'm not doing that today, and big Guardian energy pushes me further down, taking out 2 bases and getting into my main. After barely holding again, building a legion of spore colonies and re-expanding, I get to work. I send the spotting overlords in, get vision of the mineral field, and there's nothing defending the spot. That was the tank. It takes a couple tries, but I get the Nidus up and I start streaming my forces through. The enemy has defense matrix, ultralisks, firebats, lurkers, and sunks, literally everything that hard counters Zerglings, but I stream thousands and thousands of minerals through this canal into the enemy base. Eventually, I manage to down the hive and claim the low ground on the final island. Just in time, too. Every base on the main island has mined out. My income was basically 0 at this point. The island base is loaded though. Using its economy and my massive hatcheries, I build a near maxed force of perfectly upgraded Zerglings and send them up the tiny ramp towards the Overmind. The majority of my army is dead before I can finish sending the Zerglings. We're not done yet. As I prepare for a final shove, I remember that in order to win, I have to have at least one starting Dank Templar next to the Overmind. So I send him over to my Nidus Canal, and I can't send Dank Templar through a Nidus? What? Why? I really should have removed this Overlord drop rule a long time ago. But I'm a stubborn fool, so only for objectives it is. I begrudgingly get drops to transport the Dank Templar, send the Zerglings in, targeting the Overmind down. He falls, and I get credit without the DT attacking. And this hour-long slog is finally complete. Honestly, many people will say that no drop overlords besides for objectives rule is silly, but this mission would have been 10% as wild without it. Looking back on it, it's annoying, I'll admit that, but it has made some really fun scenarios pop up. and for that reason alone, I'm glad it exists. The penultimate mission is the Reckoning, a mission that I always forget about. There's a Terran base to the north of me, south of me, and a Protoss force to the east. The only objective is to defeat the Protoss in 30 minutes, but I decide to fight the Terran too because I can. The mission starts you off with every tech structure and a hive, which is nice but doesn't actually give me that much of an advantage. The big problem is that I'm sitting on a single mineral field and all of the other ones on the map are occupied, so I head to the south to foreclose the UED's camp. Despite being crushed in the last mission, the UED actually puts up a good fight here. I'm cleaned up and have to try again. Normally this wouldn't be a problem, but because 1998 is weird and time is an illusion, 10 minutes have passed on the top countdown timer while I've only gotten 7 minutes of playtime. This means that the 30 minutes that I have is actually more like 20 minutes and a third of it is already gone. It takes 3 waves to mop up the Terran expansion, and I debate if it's actually worth sending my forces to the north. It's a far better base, and I don't really have the time I thought I did. So I decide to bust it because I'm not a coward. I send a multi-prong assault from both sides, hoping to disarm the spider mines and maybe pick off some tanks. I get a few tanks and bunkers, but I have to go again. After a few minutes of pushing, I do manage to break the base, and it absolutely was not worth it. But I claim it and put an unnecessary hatchery down because I don't understand what the sunk cost fallacy is. With all this said and done, I managed to bring an incredible 80 supply to the Protoss base with 7 minutes remaining. After those units snipe the Reavers, Archons, and Templar, the second wave washes over the Protoss uncontested. And then I finish off the mission a bit annoyed because there was another section where I have to get Overlord drops to finish off some random buildings. Omega is the final mission. We're surrounded on all sides. The UED controls the north third of the map. The southwest is owned by Mengsk and the southeast is owned by the Protoss. So we have to fight all the factions that are consistently the most difficult in StarCraft 1, and the Protoss. There are 2 easily accessible expansions to the north and south of my main. I grab them both and quickly start to macro up. The enemy gets aggressive fairly early. The UED sends infantry supported by Goliaths and eventually battlecruisers into the fight. The Protoss like Zealots, Dragoons, Dark Templar, and eventually Carriers. And Mengsk is a big siege tank enthusiast, with nukes for good measure. Not sure if I want to eliminate the UED or Protoss first, I send a scouting force up north. After it gets vaporized by 4 battlecruisers and their friends, I consider swapping to the Protoss, but am seriously scared of the battlecruisers when they get aggressive, so I go for Dougal first. The terrain around his base is tough. A small bridge leads to a small ramp, which is the only way in or out. Normally, it's far better defended, but I got in early enough and he hasn't managed to build a strong garrison yet. Once breached, I start heading for his production. The base is filled with battlecruisers who one-shot my forces, but I don't need to kill all of his units, or even all of his structures, just the buildings that can make things. Artanis is not happy about my aggression and counterattacks, taking out a significant chunk of my mineral line. But joke's on him, I built 12 hatcheries and am still somehow banking money because I'm bad. After Dougal's main is down, I head to his outpost, clean him out, and he surrenders. The top half of the map still has about 200 supply of capital ships floating around, but nobody told Dougal he could float his buildings, so it didn't matter. It was a painful clear, but honestly, went better than I expected. Next up is Artanis. I'm pretty sure that Mengsk never goes for big air, so while he's more competent than the Protoss, I can save him for last. The blue base isn't exactly hard, but it is annoying. A bunch of flyers, including Arbiters, which cloak nearby Protoss, and Dark Templar are defending. My overlords can't get into good position and keep getting sniped, so I can't detect. But that gimmicky defense can't last forever, and a few waves whittle him down to nothing. Finally is Mengsk. I send in my final assault of the campaign. And oh my goodness, Mengsk has been building up a few tanks. I was wondering what he was doing, given that he never really attacked me throughout all of this. The boy entrenched himself hard, and he wipes my entire army without me breaching the choke point. Whoa. I charge another 150 supply army in and can't even connect with a tank. Both in this run and Marines only, Mengsk has consistently been a thorn in my side, and I love it. I absolutely cannot beat him in a straight up fight. I'll have to outposition him. I grab all of my forces and send him down to his southern outpost. This forces Mengsk to abandon his siege position and relocate his tanks. I intercept them and take them down before they can siege up, and Mengsk is now defenseless. Well, he has like 100 other units, but none of them are nearly as scary as 10 siege tanks, so they don't count. As I burn down the Terran's production, I can only think one thing. I have to get Overlord drops to kill these 3 command centers, huh?